Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Abbey, Adult Services Librarian for the City of Forest Grove. Like many of you, I spent a lot of the past couple of months indoors. But instead of brushing up on my Spanish, practicing the ukulele, or jumping on board the sourdough bandwagon, I did what I usually do when I've got a few hours to kill. I read. And what started out as a way to keep my sanity and to pass the time soon turned into a literary journey of sorts, one that served as the inspiration for the Festival of Forgotten Authors, a summer long virtual program we're running in conjunction with Adult Summer Reading 2020. Each week between now and September 2nd, I'll be your guide for a highly personal exploration of writers whose works have, for a variety of reasons, been unjustly neglected, overlooked, or underread. And I'll share some novels, short fiction, and story collections that I think deserve a much wider audience than they currently have. I'll introduce my first forgotten author next week, but I thought it'd be helpful to define the term forgotten, because as it turns out, there are lots of reasons why someone might slide into obscurity. I should mention that this phenomenon isn't unique to the literary world. Classical music, to take just one example, is full of composers whose operas, string quartets, concertos, and stage works once graced the concert halls and opera houses of Europe and the United States, but who, for a variety of reasons, often not through no fault of their own, have just fallen out of favor. And the same thing is true with authors. I'm going to set aside the question of talent, which is often one of the main reasons that an author can become forgotten, and focus on a couple of other external factors that I've identified. Writers are products of their time, but in some cases their works rely too much on contemporary viewpoints. Their stories may focus on social or cultural practices or mores that are relevant to their audiences, but that don't necessarily translate to another time period. In some cases, an author can be slightly out of sync with their time, and they write things that contemporary audiences either aren't interested in or that they're not ready to understand. In a sense, they're either ahead or behind their time. Now, speaking of timing, authors can also be the victims of a series of uncertain events. A good example here is the British writer Winifred Watson. Her novel Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day was a huge success when it came out in 1937, and it was all set to be translated into German, but the bombing of Pearl Harbor put an end to a proposed idea of a Hollywood musical, and the London Blitz altered her living conditions significantly, such that she couldn't write and she couldn't get out to promote her work. Output is another reason that authors can lapse into obscurity. They produce few works or they produce too many works. Dying is another reason that authors can be forgotten, particularly if they die young or they die before they realize their full potential. I'll talk about an author later in this series named J.G. Farrell, whose death at the age of 44 effectively capped a career that many felt had still several years, if not decades, to go. Authors are not always the best promoters of their own works, and in some cases they can lapse into becoming recluses. And we'll see at least one author who is very shy about being out in the public and whose attitudes about promoting their work led to at least a temporary forgotten status. And finally, there's the issue of race and gender, both of which can play significant roles in contributing to an author's status as forgotten. So as you can see, there's a lot of ground to cover over the next several weeks, and I can only begin to scratch the surface. I hope that by the end of this series, you'll have found something that piques your curiosity enough to add a few of these forgotten authors to your list of books to be read.